The boy screamed as the iron glowed red. They'd dragged him into the square by his heels, kicking up dust and splinters from the wooden gallows platform, his tunic soaked in mud and old blood. Men cheered, women turned away. Somewhere, a baby cried. The executioner didn't flinch. He just lifted the glowing brand with his thick, soot-blackened hand and pressed it hard against the child's bare back. The stench of burning flesh sliced the air. "You speak again," the sheriff spat, "and next time we'll take the tongue." 13-year-old Edric didn't scream again. He was done screaming. It hadn't started like this. A week ago, Edric was just a baker's son in the small hill town of Grendelmeyer, where nothing ever happened except the usual plague, taxes, and petty lords drunkenly demanding daughters. His only ambition had been to someday run the oven when his father's hands gave out. But then he saw something, and he spoke, and that was the last time Edric knew peace. It was on a Tuesday. The rain had stopped hours earlier, and the sun made the puddles shine like coins in the dirt. Edric had wandered off after the bell to deliver leftover bread to the monks up the hill. Father trusted him now. He wasn't a child anymore, not since his sister died, and he took up her share of the chores. He liked the walk. The old oak trees whispered to each other, and he liked to think maybe his sister was among them, riding the wind. That's when he saw the knight. Not just any knight, but Lord Farron's steward, Sir Gawain, in his grand blue colors, riding a horse that looked too fine for the muddy trail. Edric ducked behind a hedge when he saw another rider come from the opposite side. Two men, no words, just a pouch exchanged. Coins, Edric thought. Then a third rider appeared, and a scream, wet and short, like meat being torn in half. Sir Gawain dismounted. He and the second man dragged the third off his horse and into the bramble. Edric peered through the leaves, heart pounding. What he saw stole his breath. They slit the man's throat, but not before cutting off his ring finger. The signet clinked as it dropped into a leather purse. They buried the body under shallow leaves and rode off as if nothing had happened. The monk never got his bread. Edric ran back, clutching the loaves to his chest, as if they might protect him. He told Father. Father slapped him across the face. "You say that again," his father hissed, "and you'll be the next to disappear. But I saw you saw wrong. Now shut your mouth." But Edric didn't shut his mouth. He told the parish priest, thinking surely God would care. But the priest only nodded slowly and lit another candle, as if offering prayers was enough to erase murder. He told old Bram, the blind cobbler, who said, "Boy, there are graves older than your sense. Don't make trouble." He even went to the sheriff, and that's when they came for him. Edric woke up 2 days later in a lice-ridden prison beneath the keep. Wrists raw and lips cracked. They gave him water when he begged, bread when he cried, but no mercy. "Why did you lie, boy?" the sheriff growled. "What were you promised?" Edric shook his head, tears already dry. "I didn't lie. You called a noble a murderer. I saw. That's when the guards held him down and burned him. After that, the story spread. Edric had lied. slandered a lord, tried to blackmail him. The branding was mercy, they said, a warning to others. The boy went home with a mark down his back and silence in his throat. But silence didn't keep him safe. 3 nights later, someone slit the baker's throat. Edric found his father slumped over the kneading bench, blood in the flour, eyes wide in disbelief. No gold taken, no footprints, just a message scorched into the wood above him. This is what truth earns. The town said thieves. The sheriff said brigands. The priest said God's will. But Edric knew better. He ran out of Grendelmire, out of the hills, into the forests where the taxman didn't go and the wolves still hunted. He nearly died the first week, nearly froze the second. By the third, he was eating rats and moss. By the fourth, he met Branna. She saved him with an arrow to the neck, not his. Thank the stars. The man chasing him never saw it coming. One moment he was calling Edric a filthy little brat. The next he was gasping with a shaft through his throat. Who sent you? Branna asked the corpse. He didn't answer. He bled. She turned to Edric. You're branded, she said, pointing to the back of his tunic. He nodded. She studied him, then added, You speak. I used to, he stammered. She tossed him a waterskin. Well then, use those words to tell me why they want you dead. It took time, firelight, food, trust. But Edric told her everything. Branna listened in silence, dark eyes never blinking. When he finished, she didn't speak right away. Then she said, You're not the first. What? She poked the fire. The lords. They've built their power on secrets, theft, murder, treachery. But they fear one thing, truth, spoken, aloud, written down, witnessed. Edric frowned. But everyone says I'm a liar. They always do, until someone proves them wrong. And then they kill you. He blinked. You mean there are others? People like me? Branna nodded. They call us ghost mouths, ink thieves, truth rats. We're the ones who see too much, say too much, and the world wants us buried. She pulled something from her cloak, a bundle of parchments tied in waxed string. I keep records, stories, names, every injustice I find, every person who speaks. Why? Because someone passed to, because someday it might matter. Edric stared at the bundle. It looked fragile, almost pathetic. Could it really change anything? But what do you do with them? He asked. Branna's smile was cold. I spread them, whisper them, pass them on to others like me. And if the story's too dangerous, I bury it deep until the day it's safe. You think mine's dangerous. You saw a noble kill another noble. That kind of truth can burn down kingdoms. Edric wasn't sure if he felt proud or doomed. She took him under her wing, taught him to walk like a shadow, speak with caution, hide in plain sight. He learned to write, to copy letters, to carry secrets sewn into sleeves. They moved from town to town, always one step ahead. They listened, observed, recorded, but danger followed them like a stain. In Harnbrook, a girl was hanged for writing a poem accusing the Baron of poisoning his brother. In Lethwin, A monk was found drowned in his ink vat after revealing forged relics in dagger cross. They watched a 12-year-old boy beaten to death for reporting that his master had stolen church grain. Edric began to understand. Truth was a weapon, but wielding it meant bleeding. And then, one night, they heard a name. Sir Gaben. Ed R.I.K. froze. They were in a tavern near the coast, a place filled with fishermen, smugglers, and drunk sailors. Two men at the next table were whispering. Said Gaven's heading east. Something to do with that missing seal. Thought that was years ago. But someone's been talking. Lord Farrant's getting nervous. Branagh leaned close. That's your night. Edric nodded slowly, rage and fear crawling through his veins. She grabbed his hand. This is your moment. But be sure, once you act, there's no going back. I want him to pay, Edric said. I want the world to know what he did. Branagh pulled out her parchment and ink. Then let's write the truth. But as they scribbled in candlelight, neither of them noticed the stranger watching from the alley window. A hooded man with a hawk-shaped scar and the crest of Lord Farrant on his blade. Rain hammered the shingles of the tavern roof as Branagh and Edric slipped out the back, the bundle of parchment hidden beneath her cloak. They didn't know how long the man with the hawk scar had been watching. They didn't ask. They only ran, through alleyways slick with mud, past shuttered homes and sleeping dogs, down into the lower quarter where the smell of fish guts overpowered the stink of fear. Branagh's boots hit the ground like a drumbeat. Edric followed, gasping but silent, his hands gripping the ink-stained satchel to his chest. We've been marked, Branagh muttered, eyes scanning every shadow. They'll hunt us now, not just guards, mercenaries, paid tongues, even beggars. I thought we were always hunted, Edric said, trying to sound brave. Now it's different. Now they know your name. They found shelter in an abandoned smokehouse near the edge of the bay. Its rafters blackened with years of fire, its door sagging on rusted hinges. Branagh set a trap at the entrance while Edric cleared a space among the old hooks and bones. By dawn, the stranger came. The trap didn't catch him. It was Edric who spotted the glint of metal outside, a blade slipping between two slats in the wall. He didn't speak. He just grabbed Branagh's arm and pulled. The knife buried itself in the dirt where she'd been sitting seconds before. Then came the crash, the door flying open, splinters in the air, the stranger lunging in with silent fury. Branagh rolled, drew her dagger, met steel with steel. Edric scrambled back, clutching the satchel, heart punching against his ribs. The fight was quick, brutal. The stranger was trained, every strike aimed to kill. But Branagh was faster, smarter. She kicked dirt in his eyes, slipped under his swing, and drove her blade into his thigh. He fell with a growl. Branagh stood over him, chest heaving. Who sent you? He smiled, teeth bloodied. He already knows. Branagh glanced at Edric. We move now. They didn't stop to clean the blood. By the time the sun rose, they were on a cart heading north, pretending to be mother and son. Edric hid the parchments beneath the hay. Branagh kept her hand on the hilt of her blade. We can't outrun them forever, Edric said, voice hoarse. We're not running, Branna said. We're delivering to who? She looked ahead, where the road vanished into the mist, to the Whispering Guild. Edric had heard tales, a secret order scattered across the realm, collecting stories, harboring witnesses, punishing tyrants through exposure rather than steel. Most said it was myth, just bedtime nonsense. But now he wasn't so sure. They traveled for 4 days, avoided inns paid, with silver sealed in wax. Once they passed a caravan of priests. Branna bowed her head. Edric kept his eyes down. One of the priests turned and stared, a second too long. On the 5th night, they reached the ruins. It had once been a monastery, the kind with towering walls and gargoyle spouts. Now it was mostly rubble, but beneath the chapel, hidden by a slab of stone and an old prayer book, was a stairwell. Branna led Edric down. The Whispering Guild didn't dress in robes or speak in riddles. They looked like anyone. Merchants, widows, old scribes, even a toothless boy who handed Edric a candle without a word. But their eyes were sharp, listening eyes, measuring. The leader was a woman named Sister Mirwin, not a nun, not anymore. Her fingers were ink-stained. Her mouth was tight. You bring words, she said to Branna. Words worth bleeding for. Mirwin turned to Edric. Is this the boy? Edric stood straighter. Yes. You saw Gavin. Yes. And you wrote it down. Edric nodded. He opened the satchel, laid the parchment out on the stone table. His hands trembled. Mirwin read. Her brow furrowed. This is dangerous. Branna stepped forward. That's the point. You understand what happens if we release this. Edric didn't answer. Farrant's alliances run deep. Half the King's Court owes him favors. Gavin is his blade, his secret keeper. Exposing him could start a war. Branna's jaw tightened. Or it could end one before it begins. Mirwin studied Edric. You've lost your family. He nodded. Then, this is your choice. Not Branna's, not mine. Edric looked at the parchment. The letters felt heavier than they had when he wrote them. They felt like stones tied to his feet. But he thought of his father's body, of the scream in the woods, of the brand still itching on his back. He met Mirwin's eyes. Do it. She didn't smile, just gave a single nod. That night, the scribes began their work. Copies were made, messengers dispatched, hidden routes used. Within days, the story would cross the realm, whispered in markets, painted on walls, slipped between holy books and broadsheets. But Gavin moved faster. The monastery burned. 2 nights later, Edric had just finished helping the boy with the candle clean a wine rack when the first scream tore through the halls. Fire bloomed behind the chapel. Branna grabbed Edric, shoved him toward the tunnel. They're here. No, he said. We have to help. Run. He turned. Sister Mirwin was already gone. The scribes, to smoke, choked the air. Someone shouted his name. Then he saw him at the top of the stairs, Gavin steel in hand, eyes like ice. He stepped forward, Edric. Branna drew her sword. Edric didn't move. Gavin smiled. I remember you. You've grown. And then he charged. The torchlight flared. Blades rang. Edric ran behind him. Brunner screamed. Then silence and fire. Edric never looked back. Smoke followed him for miles. Edric didn't stop, running until his legs collapsed beneath him somewhere in the woods past the river. His palms were raw, cut by thorns and branches. His eyes burned, not just from the smoke, but from what he'd left behind, what he'd heard. The echo of Branner's scream wouldn't leave him. He lay there, curled against the roots of a twisted elm until the stars blinked into view. His breath came in gulps. His ribs ached. His satchel, the one with the copies, was gone. The truth had burned with the monastery. He wanted to scream, pull at the earth, and curse the gods for their silence. But he didn't. He didn't even cry. He had no tears left. Only the cold truth that Branner was gone. Sister Mirwin, too. Everyone who'd tried to help him, all gone. Because he opened his mouth. A twig snapped nearby. Edric jerked upright. His body screamed in protest. He held a rock, useless against a blade. But he gripped it like it meant something. A figure stepped from the shadows. Not Gavin, not a soldier. A child, a girl. No older than 10. Her clothes were threadbare, her feet bare. She stared at Edric with wild eyes, then offered him a crust of bread. He didn't ask where she came from. He took the bread, chewed slowly, swallowed shame. She led him to a hole beneath a fallen millstone, where other children huddled, 8, maybe 10, maybe more, all silent, all scarred in some way. One had no fingers on his left hand. Another was blind. They were runaways, orphans, the forgotten. They didn't ask who he was. They simply let him sleep. Days passed. Edric healed slowly. He helped gather roots, carry water, chase off wolves with sticks. He didn't speak much. The others didn't seem to care. Silence was there. Shared language, but something gnawed at him. Not guilt, not grief. A whisper, a question. Was this it? Was this what survival meant? Hiding in the dirt while monsters like Gavin ruled. He couldn't bear it. One night, under the howl of wind and wolves, Edric rose. The girl with the bread stirred. You go in, she asked, voice soft. Yes, they'll kill you. I know. She didn't stop him. He walked for 2 days, stole a cloak from a scarecrow, and begged for scraps in a village to drunk on harvest ale to care. He found a tinker's wagon bound for the south and hitched a ride. The tinker asked no questions. On the 3rd day, he saw it, the port city of Yarrow's Gate. Massive, dirty, loud, but filled with mouths, ears, secrets, and scribes. He spent 2 nights sleeping beneath the bell tower of St. Caldus. On the 3rd morning, he followed a man with ink-stained hands and fine boots into the scribe's archive, a tall stone building near the courthouse. Its windows barred and guarded. Ed. R.I.K. didn't knock. He walked through the front door. The scribe behind the desk looked up. Can I help you, boy? I have a story, Edric said, about Lord Farrant, about Sir Gawain. The man raised an eyebrow. You and half the kingdom, it seems. This one's true. He said nothing more, just looked the scribe dead in the eye and pulled up the sleeve of his tunic. The brand still showed, red and raw. The scribe went still in the silence. He reached for a key and nodded toward a narrow door at the rear. Edric stepped inside. A room of books, maps, and candles waited for him. Another scribe, older and grimmer, sat at the far end, quill poised. "Speak," she said, and Edric did. For hours, he told them everything. From the trail in the woods to the fire beneath the monastery. Names, faces, words said, wounds earned. When he finished, the old scribe sat back. "Your name, Edric, not anymore. Do you know what it means to become an anonymous?" He shook his head. "It means your story is no longer yours. It belongs to the world. You vanish, but your truth doesn't." Edric hesitated. What if it gets buried again? The scribe met his eyes. Not this time. That night they hid him in the city's underbelly, a cellar beneath a wine merchant's shop, a false wall, a candle, bread, water, silence. From there he heard the city wake by morning. It had begun. Posters nailed to every tavern wall, sermons interrupted by shouts, scrolls handed from stranger to stranger. The Butcher Knight, the story of Sir Gawain, the brand, and the boy who spoke. It spread like fire. Gawain denied everything. Farrant declared treason, but it was too late. In markets, people muttered. In courts, judges paused. In churches, even the priests grew quiet. Then someone else spoke. A maid who'd seen Gawain drag a man into the woods. A former scribe of Farrant's who remembered forged letters. A guard who confessed to burying a noble's body near Grendelmire. One truth had made space for others, but the price had not yet been paid, because Gawain wasn't dead, and he had read the story, and now he wanted blood. The dockside tavern was too quiet. Gawain stood in the corner, who'd drawn one hand on his sword hilt. The room was thick with salt and smoke, but no one met his eyes. Word had traveled faster than rumor. His name was no longer just feared, it was cursed. Even mercenaries gave him space now. He didn't care. He had the parchment in his hand, the original broadsheet that had appeared all over the city. The paper was wrinkled and stained, but the title was still legible. The Butcher Knight, the story of Sir Gawain, the brand, and the boy who spoke. He crushed it in his fist and tossed it into the fire. "They think ink will save them," he muttered. The man seated across from him didn't answer. He was younger, clean-shaven, with a scholar's hands and a cut-purse's eyes. "I want the boy," Gawain said. The man nodded. "We think he's in the cellar of Brusk and Dallin's wine shop, corner of Cobbler's Row." Gawain's lip curled. "Think? There's no name, no record. Just a few shipments that don't match the books. Someone is hiding him. Then smoke them out." The man swallowed. "That might draw attention." "Good," Gawain said. "Let them watch him burn. The man hesitated, then stood. Gavin watched him disappear into the rain. It wasn't rage that drove him. Not really. It was humiliation. The kind no sword could kill. The kind that followed a man into his sleep. He had built a life on silence, control, fear. And now one boy had turned that foundation to ashdot. He wouldn't allow it. 2 hours later, the shop was burning. Edric escaped by inches. He woke to the smell of smoke and the crash of stone. The false wall buckled behind him as he shoved a crate aside and stumbled into the alley. Flames licked the sky. People shouted. Bells rang. His ears were still ringing from the concussion of a thrown torch. But one thing was clear. They knew. He ran, cloak still smoldering, until his legs gave out. The scribes were dead. The wine merchant, too. The shop girl who sometimes slipped him honeyed bread. All gone. Again. He made it to the outer wall before sunrise, climbed into a grain cart, and lay beneath sacks of oats, unmoving, until the cart rolled past the gates, and into the fields. Edric didn't know where he was going. He only knew he couldn't stay. South, always south, toward the borderlands where the kings had less reach and the truth still lived in whispers. He walked for a day and a night, ate nothing, drank from puddles, slept beneath hedges. Then, near the edge of a crumbling stone bridge, a voice spoke from behind a tree. "You're late," he spun. A woman stood there, older than Bronna had been. Not armed, not armored, but her voice had weight. Her cloak was midnight blue. "Who are you?" Edric asked. She stepped forward. "My name is Elizabeth. I'm from the second ring." He blinked. "The what?" She nodded toward the horizon. The Whispering Guild never died. It split, scattered. Some of us kept the old ways. Some of us learned new ones. Edric stared at her. "They're all dead." "Some, yes, but not all." He didn't believe her. Not entirely. But when she offered her hand, he took it. They walked in silence through fields and thicket, past ruins and watch posts. Elizabeth spoke little, but at dusk she handed him a scroll, sealed with wax, marked with a raven. "What is it?" he asked. "A name, a place, a voice that matters." The scroll read, "High Inquisitor Pelgrim. Elswick Abbey keeps record. May bend. Ed. Rik folded the parchment. "And if he won't, then we break him." That night, they camped by a cold stream. Elizabeth taught him how to disguise his walk, how to make a priest's robe from a blanket, how to read the meaning behind a noble's seal. "You're not just a witness now," she said. "You're a weapon." "I don't want to kill," Edric said. "You won't have to. You'll make others do it for you." He didn't sleep. He stared at the stars and wondered how much more of him would have to vanish before the world changed by morning. They were riding east toward Elswick, toward the Abbey, toward a man who kept secrets beneath sacred robes, and behind them, riding hard and fast, came Gavin's fastest blade. Not a soldier, not a knight, a child from Grendelmeyer, Gavin's newest hound. Elswick Abbey. was carved into the cliffs like a wound in the stone, a cold, wind-bitten fortress disguised as a place of worship. The bell tower rose like a watchful eye, its iron bells rusted by salt and time. Isabet and Edric approached under cover of storm clouds, cloaked and mud splattered from the ride. The guards at the gate were monks in name only, tall, silent figures with chainmail beneath their robes and halberds in their hands. They said nothing as Isabet handed them a wax-sealed letter. One took it, vanished inside, and returned minutes later with a single nod. They were led through a dark cloister, past flickering candles and stone saints with blank faces. Edric felt every echo like a warning. The deeper they walked, the colder the air became. High Inquisitor Pelgrim sat in a narrow chamber lined with ledgers and scrolls. He wore red silk beneath his ecclesiastical robes. A thin man, clean-shaven, sharp-featured, with eyes that weighed every movement. "You're not the bishop's envoy," he said. "No," Isabet replied. He looked at Edric and the boy. A memory. Pelgrim raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" "A truth you buried." The Inquisitor stood. "You presume much. I do not deal in rumor or revenge." Isabet stepped forward. "You deal in survival. And we have a story that's turning cities inside out. You've read it." He didn't answer. "We know about the letter Gavin sent you after Grendelmeyer, the one you filed under field incidents. dated incorrectly by 2 weeks." Pelgrim went still. Edric felt something shift, a crack in the ice. Pelgrim exhaled. "If I speak, I die." Isabet leaned in. "If you don't, your silence dies for you." He turned to Edric. "You remember everything?" "Yes, even what he said before the brand." Edric nodded slowly. He said, "Silence keeps the order." Pelgrim closed his eyes. "He said that to all of them, even the ones he killed." Isabet placed a hand on the desk. "Then help us end him. Tell us what you have." That night, in the belly of the Abbey, Pelgrim unlocked a vault. Inside were parchments with blood on them, maps of dead towns, names of vanished dissenters, records not meant to exist. He gave them everything. "We send these west," Isabet said, "to Caldmere. The printers there don't flinch." But Pelgrim hesitated. "You'll need a courier, someone beyond suspicion." "I'll go," Edric said. "No," Isabet said sharply. "I have to." Pelgrim met her eyes. "Let him. No one knows his face now. Gavin expects shadows, not boy." At dawn, Edric rode out with a sealed satchel and a false name. He kept 2 forest roads, slept in tree hollows, drank from hidden springs. The path to Caldmere was long and lined with risk. Halfway there, he saw smoke rising ahead. A merchant wagon overturned, horses slain, and standing among the wreckage, cleaning blood from a blade, was the child from Grendelmeyer. Edric ducked low, heart pounding. The child was no older than 12. Pale eyes, sunken cheeks, and hands too steady. For his age, he moved like a shadow trained to cut throats. Before breakfast, Edric backed away. Then he heard it. The child spoke to no one visible. "He's not here." A pause. A voice replied, distant, thin but real. "He will be. Wait." Edric didn't wait. He turned and fled through the woods, breath ragged, limbs screaming. Behind him, no sound, no footfalls, but he knew he was being followed. For the next 3 days, he slept with a dagger in his hand. Caldmere appeared over the rise like a dream wrapped in smoke and stone. Narrow towers, banners fluttering, the scent of ink and coal in the air. Edric limped through the gates just as a bell tolled for noon. He found the printer's shop tucked between a butcher and a bookbinder. Inside, the walls were lined with copper plates and paper rolls. A woman with a silver eye and an apron stained with ink took his satchel without a word. She opened it. Her eye widened. This will crack ribs," she whispered. "Then break them all," Edric said. She did. Within a day, the new sheets were rolling off the press, hidden in crates, sewn into coats, whispered in taverns. The Inquisitor's ledger, Gavin's death list, Pelgrim's vault, and the silence that kills. The city began to stir. But so did the hunt, because the child had entered Caldmere, and he wasn't alone. He had found others like him, and they were waiting outside. The printer's shop. It began with a flicker. The printer's shop windows pulsed orange just after midnight. Not from fire, from lanterns, dozens of them, held by figures cloaked in rags and ash-grey tunics, lining the narrow alley with unnatural stillness. Their faces were blank, their eyes like pale coins. Edric crouched in the back room beside, stacks of parchment, heart thudding. The woman with the silver eye stood at the press, pressing ink-stained fingers against the release lever, lips taut. "They're not ordinary," she whispered. "Look at the way they move. No fear, no hunger, just obedience." The door rattled. Then the voice spoke. "Boy, come out." Edric recognized it, thin, cold, the same voice from the woods. It wasn't the child who spoke now. It was the one behind him, the one puppeteering it all. The woman reached for the drawer beside her, pulled out a rolled scroll, and shoved it into Edric's hand. "This is the final record. The names Pelgrim didn't show you. This is the real core, the nobles, the pie magistrates, the royals. If this gets out..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The back wall groaned, a sound like nails splitting wood. Then a crash. One of the pale-eyed children burst through, dragging a curved blade, eyes vacant. Behind him came 3 more. Edric ran. He darted through the cellar trapdoor, the scroll clutched to his chest. He didn't look back, not even when the woman screamed, not when her press exploded in sparks, not when the first lantern was hurled after him, shattering beside his feet. He burst through a sewer grate into the canal, splashed down hard, gasping. The scroll was soaked, but still intact inside its oilskin pouch, and still the silence above him. He dragged himself into the shadows, ducked under a stone bridge, and waited. The pale-eyed children didn't follow, but something else did. A shadow darker than the night, watching from the rooftops, drifting along the spires like mist. He wasn't safe. At dawn, the city was in flames, not from fire, from panic. The broadsheets had spread before the attack. The people of Coldmere had already read the names. Magistrates vanished. Royal guards turned on their commanders. Priests locked their doors. And above all of it, whispered through the alleys like smoke was the phrase. The boy who burned the silence. Edric didn't stop. He found Isabet outside the southern wall, waiting beneath a broken tower, a stolen horse beside her. "You made it," she said. "They're not just killers," he replied. "They're controlled." She nodded. The Shadow Orphanage, an old project of Ference, broken children rebuilt with obedience and pain. Only rumor. Until now, they're not rumor anymore. They rode fast, changed paths, crossed rivers and climbed crags. The scroll had to reach the second ring's hidden chamber, the only place left that could preserve what they'd found. But the road was not empty at dusk. As they climbed a narrow switchback between cliffs, Edric spotted movement above. Just a flicker, a silhouette against the fading sun. "Riders," he whispered. Isabet drew her blade. The ambush came swift and brutal. 5 of them, not the children, but adult blades. Now mercenaries. Voices Edric almost recognized. One wore Branna's old insignia, a cruel joke. Steel met steel. Arrows split the wind. Edric ducked, rolled, scrambled for the scroll as Isabet fought 2 at once. Blood hit the rocks. One rider screamed and fell. But they weren't here to kill. They wanted the scroll. One mercenary grabbed Edric's wrist, twisting until he cried out. The scroll flew from his grip, tumbling down the slope. He didn't think. He jumped, he rolled, and bounced, scraped and slammed into stone, his hands flailing. But somehow he caught it, clutched it to his chest as his body hit the last ledge. He lay still. Everything hurt. Above, Isabet shouted. Blades rang. Then silence. He crawled into the scrub, heart hammering, and stared up at the red clouds. Footsteps. A shadow. The child from Grendelmeyer stood over him, blade in hand. "I don't want to kill you," the child said softly, "but he told me to bring it back. You understand?" Edric looked up at him, at the cracked lips, the pale eyes, the trembling fingers. "You don't have to obey," he said. "I do." "No, you don't." The child hesitated, blinked, then a sound, steel slicing air. The child dropped behind him. Blood on her blade. Stood Isabet. She helped Edric up. He held the scroll tighter than ever. "We go now," she said, "before the rest find us." But the child was still breathing. Edric turned, knelt beside him. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy coughed, blood on his teeth. "I forgot." "We'll remember it," Edric said. And then the boy closed his eyes. Behind them, in the fading light, more shadows gathered. The war for silence was just beginning, and Edric had the only voice left that could tear it all apart. The chamber of the second ring lay beneath the ruins of a forgotten city. Stone steps led them underground, past crumbling mosaics and carved prayers eaten by time. The path narrowed to a throat of damp rock before opening into a vast hall, lit not by flame but by hidden shafts of daylight filtered through crystal and mirror. In that soft, ghost-blue light, men and women sat in silence, surrounded by books, weapons, and maps of cities long erased. Isabet raised a hand. A ripple passed through the room. Then they stood, every one of them, as Idrik stepped forward with the scroll. He placed it on the table. No words, just the scroll, blood-stained, torn, alive. A man with half a jaw leaned forward. A woman with no eyes laid fingers on the seal and nodded. Verified, she whispered. Then the room came alive. Scrolls were copied, names cross-checked, cities marked, sigils burned into the records. The final truth, the list of those who had orchestrated the silencing of generations, was now in the hands of those who had once lived in that silence. Isabet turned to Edric. "You've done more than speak. You've started a reckoning." But he wasn't listening. He stood near a carved wall where stories had been etched into stone. Whistleblowers of old, monks, scribes, soldiers, mothers, some tortured, some hanged, some burned, all erased, until now. Behind him, a quiet voice spoke. "You survived." He turned. It was the child, not dead, not gone. The same pale eyes, but different, alive now, awake. "I don't remember my name," the boy said. Edrik stepped closer. "Then let's find you one." Before either could speak again, a horn sounded low and cold, echoing through the rock. They were found. Stone shook, dust rained from above. Screams rose beyond the entrance shaft. Someone had betrayed the ring. Isabet drew steel. Others did the same. "Edric," she said, "take him. Go, north, exit." He grabbed the boy's hand and ran behind him. The chamber dissolved into chaos. They ran through narrow tunnels, slick with moss and memory. They passed shrines chiseled into wall faces, names of the dead written in blood. The path split. They turned left. Ahead, Torchlight. Not theirs. Figures in black armor. The royal guard of Farrant. The boy pulled Edric back, pointed up a vent shaft, barely wide enough for a child. "You first," Edric said. The boy hesitated. "You'll fit. I'll break if I must." They climbed, dirt in their mouths, knuckles raw, breath ragged, voices below. "Kill them both. Bring the scroll back." But Edric didn't have it. It was gone, left in the chamber, buried under blades. All he had now was memory. He pulled himself into the night air, into frost, wind, and starlight. The boy followed, face smeared with soot. Behind them, the ruin collapsed with a sound like a dying beast. They didn't speak. They just ran across a frost-bitten field, past frozen scarecrows and wind-churned ash, until their legs failed. Their plough stopped in the shell of a burned chapel. There, amid broken pews, they built a fire. The boy stared into it. "They killed them all," he said. Edrik nodded. Then What now? The boy whispered. Ed Rik looked out the window at the dark hills, at the sleeping silence of the world. Now we remember every name, he said. And then we find those who haven't spoken yet. Outside, the wind howled, and in the far north, the ink presses began to move again. New voices, new witnesses. The next whistle was ready to blow. The next morning, they found an old trapper's shack wedged between two pines, roof caved in, floor layered with frost and rotting furs. Edric patched what he could. The boy gathered sticks. Neither spoke much. There was too much in the air. Names lost, blood spilled, trust shattered. The silence between them was not empty, but heavy. By dusk, a fire was burning again. Edric unrolled the last remaining copy of the list, not the scroll from the second ring, but the one he had etched into memory and transcribed by hand during the sleepless hours. It was crude, ink bled, but it was complete. We need a courier, Edric said. The boy looked up to whoever hasn't been silenced. There must be others like us, hidden, waiting. We find them. We rebuild the circle. The boy hesitated. Even after all this, you still think we can win? Edric didn't answer immediately. He watched the fire, saw the ink shimmer faintly in delight. Then he said, not win, but shift. Make them fear what they tried to erase. That night, the boy dreamed of a well without a bottom and voices rising from it. Not screams, not cries, just ... names, over and over. Names he didn't recognize, but knew belonged to him somehow. When he awoke, the ink list was gone. Edric was still there, slumped, dozing, but the list had vanished. Outside, boot prints led away into the snow. They followed an hour later. They reached the edge of a clearing. A man stood at the center, arms folded, holding the ink-stained parchment in one hand and a torch in the other. You shouldn't have kept this, he said. He wore no uniform, no crest, just a hunter's coat and a priest's boots. Edric stepped forward slowly. Who are you? The one who put Pelgrim in the abbey. The one who kept Gavin's leash tight. The one whose name you didn't write because no one ever dared to learn. The boy stepped forward to your errant. The man nodded once. Then he dropped the list into the fire. Edric lunged. Too late. Flames consumed the parchment like dry grass. Ferrant didn't draw a weapon. He just stood there. Do you think paper makes a revolution? Do you think names mean anything if you don't have teeth behind them? Edric said nothing. Ferrant continued, voice low. I built silence for 40 years. I turned memory into myth. I bled every last witness until even their graves forgot them. And now a child with a scar thinks he can undo it. He turned and began to walk away. Go home, boy, before I decide to make your erasure official. But the boy stepped forward. We don't need paper, he said. We are the list. Every name you buried walks again through us. And there are others. You feel it. That's why you're here. Not to end it, to measure the fire. Ferrant stopped. Then, without turning, he spoke again. "If I see you again, I'll cut your tongue out myself." And then he was gone into the trees. The fire still burned. Ash twisted in the wind. Ed R.I.K. crouched beside the embers. Quiet, the boy joined him. "Do we start over?" "No," Edric said. "We go deeper. This time, we don't just name them, we show them." "How?" Edric stared into the flames. "We find the place where the silencing began. We find the pit, the one they built beneath the old Capitol, the one no one talks about." The boy's eyes widened. "You mean the sanctum? It's real." Edric nodded. Double quotes, "We find it. We get inside, we bring it down." In the shadows, a crow stirred far away, in the stone heart of the old Capitol. Beneath a palace built on bones, the sanctum walls whispered with the names of those who never escaped. And one of those names was waking. They traveled by night. The roads near the old Capitol were watched, not by guards in uniform, but by those who never blinked. Whisper men. They were called figures who moved without sound, loyal only to Farrant's doctrine. No eyes behind the mask, only silence and knives. Edric and the boy crossed frozen creeks, followed wolf trails, slept beneath thorns. Each day brought them closer to the sanctum, and each night the boy heard voices in his dreams, not nightmares. Memories. A name surfaced in his mind, not his own. A woman's. Edric noticed. "You heard someone again?" The boy nodded. "She said her name was Revna, and that she remembers the screams." Edric looked troubled. Revna had been a name etched into the first scroll. "A scholar who vanished 20 winters ago. Then part of her is still inside," he said. "And if she's still speaking, so are the others." They reached the edge of the Capitol by dawn. Not the gilded plazas the nobles flaunted, but the forgotten edge. Blackreach, a city beneath a city, where cold dust and broken prayers hung in the air. There they met the one Isabet had whispered about, the MAPM, AKER. Taught. Her name was Fen. She was older than she looked, and carried her maps inside her skin, literally, inked on her arms, back, ribs, veins of memory in black and blue . She let them in with no questions. "Sanctum," Edric said. She nodded, said nothing, walked to the corner of the cellar and pulled back a tarp. Underneath, a slab of polished bone, shaped like a hatch. Beneath, the palace, she said finally, but deeper than the dungeons. They lowered prisoners in cages. They didn't come back. Edric knelt by the hatch. "And this leads there." "No," Fen said. "It leads under it, to the tunnel they used to dump the bodies." The boy went pale. "Then we go where the dead went." No one argued. That night they entered the hatch. It was a long descent, cold, wet, every step echoing like a drumbeat in a tomb. The walls were close. The smell, salt and rot and iron . They came upon the first bones at the third turn, piled, broken, small, children. The boy said. Edric looked away. They didn't just silence witnesses, they erased bloodlines. As they moved deeper, the tunnel widened. Then it changed. Stone gave way to carved metal, pipes, grates, machinery long dead but once humming, words etched in an ancient dialect, sermo custodia ante silent guard. And then the gate appeared, black iron, sealed with a mechanism, older than any lock. Edric turned to Fen. She didn't blink. I've opened worse. With fingers tattooed in coordinates, she pressed symbols, turned wheels, whispered something in a language no longer taught. The gate groaned, shifted, unlocked. Beyond it, the sanctum, a vast cylinder descending endlessly. Walls lined with cells, each with a slit barely wide enough for a voice to escape. Runes etched into every surface. Blood offerings in dried streaks on the floor. The boy stepped in first. He heard it immediately. Names. Names. Thousands of them. Not ghosts. Not echoes. Memories. Locked in stone. Rev, Na, Branna, Pilgrim, even Gavin, and then his own. His real name. He stopped breathing. Tears. WELLED.EDRIK. Stepped beside him. You remember? The boy nodded slowly. They tried to make me forget, but it's still here, in the walls. A low hum started. The sanctum was waking. From the uppermost level. A sound of boots. Dozens. They've been followed, Fen hissed. There's no other exit. Edric turned to the boy. We can't run, but we can break it. If the sanctum falls, the memory with it becomes flame, not whisper. The boy's voice was clear now. Then burn it. Fen pulled a satchel of powder from her coat. They used to brand mines here, she said. We'll brand the world back. They lit the charges. As the boots closed in, as voices shouted from the catwalks above, the walls began to crack. The names screamed. The sanctum trembled, and Edric and the boy stepped into the center. One name, one voice. The explosion swallowed the sanctum in a roar of light and dust. Steel screamed as it twisted. Stone cracked open like bone. The walls that had held whispers for a century shattered into ash. Rik woke beneath rubble. Blood streaked. His face, his ears rang like bells struck by war. Beside him, the boy coughed once, then again, alive. They were buried under what had once been the sanctum's central platform. Above, cracks in the earth let in silver starlight. Through the ruin, wind howled, a sound long denied in this pit of silence. They crawled out slowly. Everything ached. The ruins burned behind them. But they had not escaped alone. As they stumbled through the wreckage, shapes moved in the smoke. Others, survivors, dozens, men, women, even children, faces pale from darkness, eyes blinking against their first sight of stars in decades. Their mouths opened, voices hoarse. One woman whispered, Revna. The boy turned. You're her. She nodded. And you are what they feared. They gathered together, the freed, the forgotten. Ed, R.I.K. stood atop a broken girder, wind in his torn cloak, voice loud enough for every survivor to hear. This is not the end of silence. It is the beginning of its death. What they buried here, we carry out. What they destroyed, we rebuild. Louder, we will name every name. We will light every hidden grave. And we will remind them, we remember. And the crowd, weak but rising, repeated with him, we remember. They moved north together, into the frost, into the unknown. News traveled fast, first in rumor, then in smoke, then in words carved into doors. The sanctum has fallen. In the capital, panic took hold. Farrant vanished. Palace walls were reinforced. Dissenters were hunted in daylight now. But fear shifted. It belonged not to the people anymore. It had returned to those who silenced them. In a valley near the Ironwater River, the survivors built their first fire. Fenn called it a beacon. Edric called it proof. They turned the ruins of an abandoned foundry into a haven. Presses were reassembled. Names were etched into walls with blades instead of ink. The boy, now older, walked among them with a new purpose. He remembered his name, Callan. The first sheet printed by the new press bore only 6 words. You tried to erase, assailed. The second named names, with dates, with places, with detail. The third included drawings of the sanctum's destruction, burned into plate. Copies spread. People carried them folded into boots, sewn into cloaks, hidden inside bread. And everywhere the pages traveled. Voices rose, some in rage, some in song, but all in memory. And from the ruins, a letter arrived, unsigned, but sealed with a symbol. An open mouth surrounded by chains. It read, "You tore down a wall. Good, but the tower still stands. And at its top, the king's ledger is locked. Bring that down, and you won't just end silence. You'll drown it." Edric read the letter aloud. Callan looked at him. "Are you ready to go higher?" Edric smiled faintly. "This time, we bring down the throne." The plan took shape in layers, not from generals, but from ghosts. Old schematics of peace, old schematics of the palace from a former architect. Servant roots passed down from a cook's daughter. Guard shifts memorized by a blind stable boy who listened instead of watched. They called it the Hollow Tower. At its core, the king's ledger, said to hold not just royal decrees, but records of every silencing, payments, authorizations, execution orders, bribes, disappearances. If exposed, it would be the scaffold under their feet. Edric gathered the leaders, Fenn, Revna, a girl named Maya who'd escaped the gallows twice. Callan stood beside them, taller now, sharper. His voice had changed, but his eyes still burned with the fire of memory. "We go at dusk," Edric said, "not as rebels, as ghosts." They moved in silence across a frost-bitten plain under moonlight. The palace stood like a blade plunged into the earth, silver towers, crimson banners, and at its base, the old stone keep, rebuilt countless times, but always on the same cursed foundation. Their entry came through the river gate. Fenn's maps had shown a drainage chute built before the lower halls were walled off. Callan was first to slip inside, the cold choking his lungs. Edric followed. They emerged in a stone tunnel beneath the eastern wing. Inside, the palace was louder than they expected. Guards shouted. Bells rang. Papers rustled. The court was panicking. The fall of the sanctum had reached them. Edric pulled a robe over his shoulders, stole from a fallen scribe. Callan carried a forged scroll. Revna moved with the limp of a servant, real and learned. They passed 3 checkpoints. No questions. In the Hall of Eyes, where marble busts lined the walls. A royal steward bowed without looking and muttered, "They say he's missing." Farrant gone like a shadow. Edric didn't pause. At the end of the corridor stood a single oak door, banded in bronze, marked with 3 vertical lines. The ledger room. A single guard stood outside Jung. Navis stepped forward. "I have orders from Chancellor." The guard frowned. "Durik's dead." Revna leaned in. "That's why the orders matter." The boy hesitated, then slowly stepped aside. The door creaked open. Inside, silence. A round chamber. No windows. No light save a single lantern hanging from the ceiling. And in the center, on a pedestal of obsidian, the ledger. It wasn't a book. It was a machine. Iron cylinders, paper reels, levers etched with code. Not built by scribes, built by the silence guard. Callan stepped closer. "It's not meant to be read. It's meant to be fed." Revna pulled tools from her belt. "Then we starve it." They worked fast. Edric copied names, took etchings of seals. Maya flipped levers, extracted print leaves. Dozens, hundreds. Then the machine word, a voice echoed. Mechanical, clipped, unauthorized. Extraction, retaliation protocol active. The door slammed shut behind them. Gas hissed from the walls. Edric shouted, "Vent it." Revna smashed a pipe. Callan threw his cloak over the vents. Maya jammed the door's mechanism with a blade. They escaped coughing, clutching documents. The alarm rose across the palace. Too late, they split. Revna took the eastern stair. Fen vanished into the kitchens. Edric and Callan burst into the hall. Bar thrones, crowded, chaotic, lords arguing, guards on edge. Edric raised the ledger leaf. "This is what you paid for," in silence. A hush fell, then a scream. Guards rushed forward. Callan threw a flare. Smoke filled the chamber. In the chaos, they vanished, out the western wall, over the parapet, into the river again. The leaves stayed dry, oil dash sealed. They surfaced on the far bank as dawn broke. Behind them, horns blared, but ahead of them, the sound of bells dot from village to village. The bells rang. The ledger was out, and silence had lost its shadow. The ledger did more than name the guilty. It cracked the myth dot across the kingdom. People read it by candlelight, whispered it in taverns, etched lines into stone walls. Names they knew, names they feared, names they lost. Now, there they were bound to atrocities, bribes, murders, buried beneath courtly smiles. Some nobles fled. Some took their own lives. Others tried to burn the pages. But it was too late. The truth had grown legs. In the south, Towns refused to pay tax. In the west, priests began reading aloud names of disappeared. In the capital, even palace guards lowered their heads when Callan's image was passed from hand to hand, drawn in charcoal, with the word witness beneath. But the king remained silent. No decree, no denial, just silence. That made them more afraid than anything in the forge haven by the iron water. Edric convened the circle again. The leaders were fewer now, some lost, some gone underground, but their reach had grown. Whistle posts now stood at every major crossing, protected by armed villagers. Stories passed through them like flame across dry leaves. "We've named the silence," Edric said. "Now we name the one who commands it." He held up the final copy from the ledger, not of orders, but of a list kept by the king himself. At its top, Farrant. Beneath, the heads of courts, abbeys, archives, and next to each, a sigil, a brand, execution. "Symbols," Revna said. "Records of who gave the nod," Callan added. Edric nodded. The king didn't just allow the silencing, he curated it. A vote was taken. It was unanimous. The people would march. Word spread through tunnels, trees, towers. Black flags were raised with an open mouth stitched in red, the symbol of the witness. On the day of the march, the capital awoke to thunder, not from the sky, but from the streets. Thousands gathered, no weapons, only names chanted, scrawled on banners, etched on their skin. Callan walked at the front, Edric beside him, Revna behind, flanked by former prisoners. Even Maya returned, scars fresh but fire brighter. The palace gates remained closed. On the steps, the royal guard, still silent. Edric stepped forward, held out the scroll. "This is not vengeance. This is memory." No response. Then a single sound, the clatter of a spear hitting stone. One guard dropped his weapon, then another, and another, and another. Dot. In seconds, the line collapsed. The gates creaked open. They walked into the palace like a tide. Callan led them through the hall. Be thrones. Empty dot through the royal gallery. Deserted at last. They reached the top tower, the king's chamber. The door was unlocked inside. No crown, no guards, no sign of a struggle. Just a chair, and on it, a letter. Edric read it aloud. "You've made memory a blade. Good. Let's see if you can wield it without blood." It was unsigned, but at the bottom, a single mark, the same 3 lines that had once sealed the ledger room. The king was gone, but the silence he shaped was not. Callan looked out the window, at the sea of people below. What now? Edric exhaled. Now we unbury every pit. We return every name. We build something louder. But behind them, in the shadows of the stone chamber, a trapdoor shifted, and far beneath the tower, in tunnels, thoughts sealed, boots moved quietly. The old silence wasn't finished yet. They found the first bodies 2 days later, in the woods near Dern Hollow. A courier hung upside down from an old pine, lips sewn shut, a piece of the ledger stapled to his chest, burned and marked with a 3-line sigil. It was a message. Silence wasn't done. It had simply changed faces. At the Iron Water Forge Haven, Edric stared long at the corpse. Callan stood beside him, fists clenched. Revna whispered, "They've started hunting again." And this time, the Whispermen didn't wear masks. They wore the faces of neighbors, of old merchants, of priests who had quietly stayed behind. A new network had risen, not sanctioned by a crown, but built from fear. Their goal: restore order, erase chaos, silence memory. They moved like shadows, spreading across the countryside, infiltrating villages, torching whistle posts. Wherever names had been raised, they answered with blood. At first, the circle responded, in kind, striking back, burning reclaimer outposts, exposing traitors. But Edric saw it happening. "We're becoming them," he told Callan one night. "We raised truth. Now we sharpen vengeance. This isn't why we fought." Callan didn't answer. He was watching the flames consume another reclaimer safe house. "There's no memory without survival," Callan finally said. "And survival means fire." Edric turned away. "Not if fire burns everything." Inside the haven, voices were divided. Some wanted war, some wanted peace, some simply wanted to disappear. Maya spoke first. "We need proof that the reclaimers are still tied to the throne. Otherwise, we're just killing old men in masks." Edric nodded. Calen looked at the map. "Then we follow their ink. Who funds them?" Revna traced a finger north to a monastery called Black Spire, officially a retreat for silence and prayer, unofficially a vault for records too dangerous, put to burn but too sacred to keep in court. They rode that night. Black Spire sat atop a cliff of basalt, surrounded by dead trees and older ghosts. No one greeted them. No bells, no torchlight. Only the sound of wind scraping across stone. Inside, the walls were lined with vellum scrolls and bone-stitched volumes. Revna broke the seal on a locked cabinet. Callan read the first name aloud. Lord Merrick, former Minister of Grain. The document beneath listed payments, routes, execution orders. Then a final line, reassigned under Reclaimer Protocol 7. Report to Farrant. The next name, and the next. Over 200 names, all connected, all still breathing, all hiding behind new robes, new creeds. It wasn't just retaliation, it was rebirth. The Reclaimers were the next silence. Fen sent word to every outpost. Truth must not become ash. But it was too late in some places. Fire already burned through the western borderlands. Black flags replaced by black veils. No names chanted now, only fear. Edric watched his people fracture, and then came the whisper. Callan met with them. It started as a rumor, then a report, then undeniable. Ed Rik confronted him. You walked into their circle. Callan didn't deny it, to offer them a choice or a deal. They fear you more than the king. That's why they kill. But if we take away the fear, they'll rebuild it again and again. Silence stretched between them. Edric stepped back. You're not the boy I pulled from the ruins. No, Callan said. I'm the voice that grew louder. The breach had begun. 2 voices, 2 futures, and across the dark hills, a new meeting was called, not by the circle, but by those who once whispered, now ready to speak with knives. Instead of names, the second war for memory had begun. The valley where they gathered had no name. It had once been a gravesite, long abandoned, then cleared by fire in the early days of the rebellion. Now it bore banners on both sides, one marked by the open mouth of the witness, the other a black mark split by a blade. Callan stood at the head of the black-marked side. He wore no armor, only the same tattered cloak he'd carried from the sanctum. But his eyes were colder, sharper. Behind him stood survivors. Yes, but also new followers. Fighters, sharpened by belief, hardened by fear. On the opposite hill, Edric watched them from behind the line of Circle loyalists. Revna beside him, Maya, Fen, a boy no older than Callan once was, clutching a scroll like a shield. There would be no full war. Not yet, but the breach had turned into a rupture. A delegation crossed the divide. Callan came with 2 escorts. Edric approached with Revna. They met at the stone that once marked a plague pit. Neither spoke at first. Then Callan broke the silence. You know they won't stop unless we burn the roots. Edric's jaw tightened. And you're digging with fire. You'll scorch the names we've spent years saving. We're past saving. We have to purge. Revna stepped forward. And who decides what memory is pure enough to keep you? Callan looked at her, almost with pity. You still think this is about memory. It's survival now. We become stronger, than silence, or we vanish into it. Edric's voice cracked. You don't see it. You've become what we fought, only louder. Callan didn't flinch. No, I became what you couldn't. Pose dot. Then Callan drew a scroll from his cloak. Names, he said. New ones. Those who funded the reclaimers. Those who helped them hide. Hidden nobles, traders, archivists. Do nothing, and they rebuild again. He handed it to Ed, R.I.K. Ed R.I.K. didn't touch it. Callan dropped it at his feet. You want to be a witness. Start seeing. Then he turned and walked back toward his hill. Edric didn't pick up the scroll. He turned to Revna. We don't follow him, but what if he's right? We find another way. That night, both camps withdrew, but neither disarmed. From the eastern cities came reports of raids, not by reclaimers, by Callan's partisans. They called themselves the Echo, said to bring truth by torchlight. Witness posts were torn down and replaced with echo monoliths, stone spires etched with their own version of history. Truth, rewritten. One of Fen's couriers was captured trying to copy an echo archive. He came back without his tongue. The circle split further. Some joined Callan, convinced he would finish what Edric only started. Others fled altogether. Edric remained. He and Revna rode from village to village, rebuilding trust, reminding people of the true cost of forgetting. They found fewer allies each week. But in one hamlet, Driggelen, a child handed Edric a stone with a symbol carved into it. Not the witness, not the echo. A tree dot with roots, and names carved into each branch. Rev asked, "Who made this?" The child shrugged. "My mother says remembering isn't about fighting. It's about planting." Edric stared at the stone a long time. Then he smiled. "We plant." He sent word to the last of the circle. No more battles. No more Mafest talk. Just trees dotted every site where silence once ruled. They would plant one, mark bit with names. No speeches, no guards, only memory. The movement was small, quiet, but in the dark, trees began to grow, and far off, on a hill ringed with fire, Callan stood before his followers. Someone brought him news. They're planting. He frowned. Planting what? Names. Callan turned toward the trees beyond the ridge. His voice was calm. "Then we burn the roots." The first tree burned at dawn. Ash twisted through the morning fog. The villagers of Greyridge watched from behind shuttered windows as Callan's men, the echo, reduced their witness tree to cinders. No warning, no words, just fire. At its roots had been names. Names of those once silenced in that region, carved gently by surviving kin. A decade of grief, scorched in minutes. Edric received the news before nightfall. He didn't speak, just lowered his head and tied his cloak. Revna tried to stop him. "You can't face him alone. I have to," he said. "This ends before he forgets who he is entirely." He rode east through storm and silence, past villages now split down. The center, some with echo stone spires, others with charred patches where trees once stood. In Elber's hollow, he saw bodies hanging from iron hooks. Not guards, scribes, their scrolls stuffed in their mouths. Edric whispered, "He's not fighting silence anymore. He's feeding it." He arrived at dusk in the burned-out fields of Briarfon. There, beneath the ruins of an abbey, stood Callan, alone but not unguarded. The hillside swarmed with echo sentries. Still Edric walked. No weapons. Just the original copy of the ledger, bound and worn. Callan watched him approach, arms folded. "You shouldn't be here." "You said the same thing to the king," Edric replied. "Just before you replaced him." Callan's gaze flickered. "You think I want a throne? You built one. On Ash, I built a wall against forgetting." "No," Edric said. "You became a flame that forgets why it burns." Silence fell. Then Callan stepped closer. "I remember everything. Every scream, every scar. Every time we begged and no one listened." Edric held out the ledger. "Then remember what you promised, that we would never become them, that we would raise voices, not erase them." Callan didn't move. Edric whispered, "You've killed people who weren't threats, just doubters. That's not justice, that's fear." Callan's jaw tensed. "They wanted to erase the truth, and so you erased them." A breeze blew between them. Smoke from a nearby torch curled through the air. Edric dropped the ledger between them. If you burn this too, there's nothing left. No proof, no path back. Callan stared at the book, then at Ed-R-I-K. Finally, he turned away. You won't stop me. No, Edric said softly. You will. He turned and walked back into the dark. That night, 2 more trees burned, but in Driglan villagers circled their tree with buckets of water. Children slept beneath it. They carved new names, deeper this time. Revna arrived with word from the north. Some of the echo are breaking away. They've started planting too, quietly, without Callan. Edric lit a lantern and handed it to a young girl. Then carry the fire, but keep it warm, not wild. He rode again, not to confront, but to plant. By spring, the map began to change. A third symbol appeared. Not the mouth, not the blade. A leaf, scattered, fragile, but growing. And Callan watched it all from his hill. When he ordered a raid on a village planting trees, half his men refused. When he tried to rally new towns, they offered no recruits. And one morning, beneath the weight of a sky swollen with rain, he sat alone beside a fire that would not light. He looked at his hands, and for the first time in years, they were trembling. In the wind, he heard voices, not enemies. Names whispered not in fear, but in remembrance. And still, the trees grew. Summer came, and with it, silence, not of fear, but of peace. The war did not end with a treaty. No flags were lowered, no thrones surrendered, but the killing stopped. One village at a time, Callan disappeared. Some said he died, alone, lost in the forest, swallowed by the echoes he once commanded. Others claimed he wandered north, seeking out old ruins where names still waited to be remembered. A few whispered that he became a shadow in the trees, watching, never intervening. But no more trees burned. In Driglan, the first tree bloomed. Its leaves bore the names of the lost, cut into the bark by trembling hands. Each new bud whispered the ones who'd come before. Revna stayed. She trained scribes again, not to record history as victors, but as witnesses. Maya returned to the east, where her scars became stories and her fire a forge for rebuilding truth. Fen carved paths between the villages, connecting the quiet memory groves with stone markers. Bar on each, a single line, remember and be loud with love. Edric grew old. He never claimed titles, never wrote a memoir. He just kept planting. One spring, children found him in a field outside Whitevale, asleep beneath a tree of names, hands stained with earth and ink. He didn't wake. They buried him beneath that tree. No speeches, no statues, just his name, etched in bark beside all the others he'd refused to forget. The kingdom changed slowly. Some towns still clung to fear. Some hid truth under new robes. But the people had learned. Silence could be buried, but it could also be uprooted. Not by war, not by fire, by remembering Dot and planting. A century passed. New rulers came and went. Cities rose and fell. The echo dissolved, The circle faded into legend. But in the northern hills, trees still stood. Travelers told stories of whispering groves, where names moved through branches like wind, where children recited old truths and elders sat in circles beneath the green, telling stories not to control, but to carry. One grove, larger than the rest, became a place of pilgrimage. They called it the Archive. It had no walls, no guards, no torches, only trees. Thousands of them. Each one held names, and one near the center bore a single message, carved deeper than all the rest. Truth isn't a war to win. It's a garden to tend. If this story moved you, remember it, share it, and keep its names alive. Like, comment, subscribe, and carry the fire gently. The world is still watching.